I still remember the stunned look on the young employee's face as I walked out of the conference room, leather briefcase in hand and a faint smile on my lips. He'd only been hired for less than a month. Barely enough time to realize this company didn't survive on spreadsheets or reports, but on something I'd carried for 2 decades: customer trust. They called me the man who keeps the door open, a poetic way to say that if anyone could retain the 10 largest construction firms on the West Coast, it was me. When payments were delayed, I showed up at job sites. When deliveries ran behind, I caught the red eye to explain things directly to the project leads. No email could do that. No software could replace a timely handshake. I started at Orion Cabinetry back in 2007 when it was a small-time supplier out of Sacramento, barely pulling in around $13 million in annual revenue. 17 years later, under the sales team I built and trained, we hit $81 million. Nearly 20% of that came from clients I personally managed. I'm not the type to talk much about achievements, but I knew my worth. Not out of ego, but because I saw what no one else on the new board cared to. Every contract was a relationship, and every phone call was more than a status update. I knew Bill's daughter, the purchasing director at Ironmark Construction, had just been accepted to the University of Michigan. I was the first person he told. Brad from Eden Developers called me when a project got stuck because materials were delayed in San Jose. I still picked up at 2 a.m. My name is Luca Weston. I'm 51 years old. My hair, once thick and dark brown, now carries streaks of gray, but my hands are steady enough to keep relationships intact through any shift. I never got an MBA, never attended an elite East Coast school. I learned the craft from my father, a carpenter in Fresno, who taught me how to run my fingers across wood grain to know which glue to use, how much pressure it could take. That understanding made me the only one in the company who could stand in front of architects and general contractors and make them believe Orion's products were worth it, not for the price, but for the quality and the name behind it. I thought I'd retire there. No one imagined everything would begin to unravel during a Monday morning meeting. But that came later. That day, I was still vice president of sales, a long title but much simpler if you'd heard me explain it to a new hire. I keep the lights on in this building. If customers stop trusting us, we shut it down. Among thick contracts, firm handshakes, and hundreds of data-filled emails, I never forgot my job wasn't just selling wood. I sold assurance. I sold peace of mind to project managers. I sold the belief that if anything went wrong, Luca would fix it. Everyone at Orion knew that, or at least I thought they did. That meeting started with the smell of watered-down coffee, an air thick as dust left unswept on the oak conference table. Across from me, in a dark blazer with sleeves cuffed down to the last stitch, sat the woman everyone whispered about as the Shadow CEO. Her name was Miranda Thorne. Miranda had been sent by Arkwell Group, the firm that quietly acquired Orion Cabinetry last quarter. None of the old board stayed after the deal, except me and Brian, the CFO. But to Miranda, I was just another framed photo gathering dust on the wall, nostalgic but obsolete. She skipped pleasantries. "We've reviewed compensation packages," she said, swiping across her tablet like flipping through expired customer cards. "Your base salary will drop by 38% effective next month. Commission structure will also change to reflect the new growth strategy." I raised my head, met her gaze. No reaction, no anger. The only movement was a slight curl of my lip, as if I'd just heard a bad joke. She kept going, like lecturing a first-year MBA class. "The market no longer runs on personal relationships, Mr. Weston. We need a data-driven system. Clients will be managed through Orion Sync 2.0. All processes fully transparent and optimized." I looked at the file she slid across the table. New salary, new commission rates, performance graphs, and at the bottom, a bolded section titled Client Account Reassignment. Below it, I read the name of the person set to replace me in handling major accounts: Sierra Holt, a brand new sales rep who had come from interior design. "No transition period?" I asked, pointing at the transferred client list. "We trust our team's adaptability," Miranda replied, eyes unblinking. I nodded without a word, but questions surged in my mind. Who would answer the phone at 9 p.m. when a site needed a last-minute delivery change? Who would remember Brad was allergic to pine wood, or that Westbuild only received shipments on Tuesday mornings? Those details meant nothing to Miranda. To her, everything was data. Trust, something that took 10 years to earn, was just another variable on a spreadsheet. 3 days later, I saw Sierra in the company cafeteria, eating lunch with a few familiar clients. Among them was Mr. Ramsey from Civic Build, the same man who'd sent me handwritten Christmas cards for 7 straight years. Sierra smiled, scrolling through the menu like choosing a salad for Instagram. Ramsey spotted me, paused for a second, then nodded quietly. No one said anything else. It was already in motion. I hadn't left yet, but I was already out. That afternoon, Brian came by my office, voice lowered. She's rewriting the bonus structure, targeting the long-term contracts you negotiated. I wasn't surprised. Miranda didn't want me gone because I was underperforming. I reminded her this business was once built on people, not formulas. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring at the list of accounts marked reassignment in progress. Under the dim light, names like Mark Dwyer, Olivia Chen, Michael Randall read like a shipping manifest. I printed a copy, folded it into my personal file, and locked the drawer. Not to claim ownership, just to remember who had trusted me before they were labeled conversion potential. None of the new board saw what was coming, but I did, as clearly as the first cracks on old wood, where any seasoned carpenter knows a beam won't hold for much longer. The next morning I returned early before the scent of engineered wood could be overtaken by machine-brewed coffee. Inside that empty office, the brass nameplate on my door caught the sunlight just enough to feel more like a souvenir than a title. Office keys, ID card, and even the Mont Blanc pen Orion gave me for my 10-year anniversary. I placed everything in a cardboard box. Not much, just a few personal items. A photo of my daughter beside her old Jeep, a leather notebook with handwritten client notes, and a Christmas card from the Wallace family, who once said, "As long as Luca's at Orion, we don't need anyone else." No farewell, no extra meeting. Miranda didn't even step down from her floor. Everything unfolded just the way she planned, quiet, efficient. But that didn't mean she had control of the outcome. As I walked to the parking lot, I met eyes with Brian through the second-floor window. No wave, just a look that said what his department couldn't. You weren't fired. You were phased out. I set the box in the back seat, took my time. One phone call could have made Miranda understand the cost of her brilliant decision. I didn't place it. No need. As I passed the gate, a text lit up my phone from Ken, the purchasing director at Highland Structures. "Heard you left. If true, we need to talk." No hello, no sign-off, just urgency, like when a shipment runs late or blueprints come back wrong. That afternoon, I sat on my back porch, watching my 7-year-old nephew struggle with a model I'd built from leftover wood scraps. In my mind, a list of old relationships resurfaced, like seasoned beams, ready to be joined into something solid somewhere else. No CRM system could ever remember that Mark only orders red oak when it's a school project, or that Olivia only processes payments per phase when working on government contracts. Those details can't be stored in charts. They live only in the memory of someone who's listened enough to understand. I didn't reach out to any of them, but the next day, 3 had already contacted me. They heard through private channels, not internal reports. They asked where I was, what I was planning, if I was still in the industry. Some paused for a few seconds, then simply said, "If you're starting something new, let me know first." That Thursday night, I opened the handwritten pricing log I kept by quarter, the only copy not stored in any system. As I scanned the familiar notes, it hit me. I hadn't built market share. I'd built trust. No one can force a client to stay, but they'll follow someone they believe won't let them sink over a faulty Excel formula. I called my old lawyer to double-check the exit agreement restrictions. There was no clause barring client contact, just a 6-month block on selling competing products. I didn't need product. I needed people. The next morning, I stepped into a small cafe at the end of 11th Street, the same place where I once closed 3 major deals over a single espresso. As the barista set the cup down, I was nearly finished drafting an email to the owner of a wood supply chain in the Southwest I met at an industry expo last year. I didn't send it. I sat a bit longer to make sure when I moved forward, it wasn't a reaction, but a step I had already planned. Not to retaliate, just to prove that loyalty doesn't come from a system. It comes from people, and those people were waiting for me to act. That afternoon, while scrolling through old contacts on my phone, a call came in from Carson. Carson Rumor, project director at Renshaw Commercial, a man who once told me if there were ever a fire on site, he'd call me before calling the fire department. Luca, his voice was urgent, irritated. This Miranda woman is trying to renegotiate our contract. She wants to apply a new pricing model under some financial restructuring. Are you still with Orion? I'm out, I said calmly. Silence, then a heavy sigh. Figured. She sent over someone new, a girl named Sierra. She doesn't know a damn thing about specialty interiors. I asked about connector specs for load-bearing flooring. She Googled it. I wasn't surprised. Carson lowered his voice. If you're working on something new, I want to know. As soon as we hung up, I opened my laptop and drafted an email titled Strategic Collaboration Opportunity. Recipient, Ryan Dillinger, COO of Timberline Supply, a large distributor looking to expand into cabinetry and commercial interiors in California. We'd exchanged a few words at a conference last year where I spoke about trends in water-resistant materials. I didn't send it yet. I saved it as a draft and set a reminder to revisit it in 3 days. The next morning, just after stepping out of the auto shop, my phone buzzed again. It was Amanda from Tate & Mason Design Build. Luca, what the hell is going on at Orion? She asked, so fast she seemed afraid she'd back out. They just asked me to re-sign our contract with something called a project tier delivery priority. What even is that? I didn't give a direct answer. I just said, I'm no longer handling your orders. So it's true, they forced you out. Her voice dipped. We didn't work with Orion for the price. We worked with you because when something went wrong, you fixed it before the architects could even complain. I meant to reassure her, but Amanda cut in. If you join someone else, tell me first. I don't want my clients paying the price for someone learning on the job. Less than 3 hours later, the phone rang again. It was Anthony Rowe, VP of Operations at Brickline Builders. His intro was brief. I heard the news. You considering anything? 3 calls in under a day. Same concern, same frustration. That evening, I sat in the basement office and reopened the draft to Timberline. I changed the subject line to Luca Weston, ready to discuss real opportunity. This time I hit send. I hadn't promised anything to anyone, but one thing was clear. These people weren't looking for a new supplier. They were looking for someone who made them feel safe signing the deal. The next day, a message from Carson arrived before dawn. 2 o'clock, Old Cafe. I replied, works, nothing more. At 1:45, I was already there. Carson sat waiting. No coffee, no documents. Just the same analytical stare he used to give when we debated finish options for water-resistant plywood on site. I'm not here for pleasantries, he said. I just need to know. If I move all commercial interior orders to you, should I worry about quality or delivery? I didn't offer vague guarantees. I told him what I was planning, about the talks with Timberline, and how I aim to build a lean team, fast enough to adapt, experienced enough not to test on the client's dime. Carson nodded. If you do it, I'm in. He stood up before the coffee could cool, leaving me with one dry statement. We're not buying product, we're buying the person behind it. I stayed seated a bit longer, not to savor a win, but to let it sink in. I didn't need to hunt for new clients. They were already finding their way back. Not for price, not for ads, but because they remembered who stood with them when everything was unstable. I submitted my resignation on Monday morning, exactly 9 o'clock, with the copy sent straight to legal. No explanations, no reasons attached, just 8 bold words in the subject line. Voluntary termination of employment agreement. Within 48 hours, Miranda called back. Her tone was softer than it had been in meetings. Luca, maybe we can discuss a severance package. There are financial terms I think you'll find reasonable. I let a pause hang before answering. I didn't come here for a cushion, Miranda. I came to drive revenue. I'm leaving because someone else is dismantling what I built. So this is final, she asked. I've already left the building. Then I ended the call. That evening I met with my attorney, Rick Talmadge, the same one who handled my second house purchase in San Rafael. This time, it wasn't real estate. It was a promise broken on corporate letterhead. Rick combed through every page of Orion's non-compete. Finally, he rested his hand on the file and said, "They bar you from selling similar products for 6 months. But they can't stop you from talking to people. They can't stop clients from coming to you. More importantly, they forgot to restrict region." I smiled. So, I'm not blocked across the entire West Coast? Not at all. 3 days later, I walked into North Bay Materials headquarters in Fremont. Ryan Dillinger, the COO, was waiting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the freeway. On the table sat the draft of a new division they were exploring, commercial interior supply. No one had touched it yet. Ryan shook my hand, eyes clear with intent. "I need someone who can turn concept into revenue. You've done it before. I want you to do it here." No interview, no trial period. Ryan pushed a formal offer across the table. Senior Vice President of Business Development. Full hiring authority, team design, market selection. I don't want monthly reports. I want signed deals. I scanned the paperwork. Not a single clause about client contact. No conditions barring outreach. Most importantly, the budget was approved, and a 3-year plan greenlit by the board. "I need 2 weeks to prepare," I said. "You've got 3, if needed." I left with the contract in hand, not carrying hope, but a roadmap. On the way home, Miranda's email hit my inbox. Short. No question marks. "We heard you're working with North Bay. We expect you to honor your contractual commitments." I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Rick with a note. "Save it, no action for now." On my first day at North Bay, I arrived earlier than the receptionist. My office was a plain glass corner. No nameplate, no logo, but 3 client folders sat waiting on my desk. Carson, Amanda, Anthony. I hadn't called them. They had asked to meet as soon as Mr. Weston settles in. I didn't need to reach out. They'd already made their choice. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. No name saved, just 4 words. "Can we meet privately?" The sender? Thomas Valdez, head of finance at Orion. I'd once thought he'd never dare step out of his comfort zone. A second message followed. "I have something you need to see." I glanced up at the whiteboard on the wall, where I'd written a single line earlier that morning. "Everything starts with trust. No system can replace that." And I knew I'd stepped into the right place. Not just a new company, but a moment when everything I'd built was ready to come back to me, stronger than anything Miranda could have imagined. Less than 6 weeks after signing with North Bay, 3 major contracts were closed. No marketing, no press release, just quiet calls, a few working lunches, and a string of decisions born from the quiet frustration of longtime clients who had been abandoned by the very company they once trusted. By week 8, Anthony from Brickline confirmed a full shift of all interior supply orders to us. No rebidding, no triple-ed comparisons. He simply said, "I need to go back to the person who understands what I'm building, not someone tracking KPIs through click counts." Amanda from Tate & Mason sent an email with a subject line that left no room for doubt. "Ending Orion contract early, starting over with North Bay." Attached was a new delivery schedule signed personally by her CEO. Carson didn't say anything else. He just sent a photo of their first pallet shipment, branded with the North Bay label, delivered to a job site in Stockton. Captioned, "Delivered correctly, no complaints, just like before." Word spread quickly in the field. Contractors, architects, and procurement managers started whispering, "Luca Weston's now at North Bay." Within 3 months, 6 out of 10 of Orion's top clients had canceled their contracts. 2 others were scheduling meetings with me the following week. One afternoon, while reviewing a draft for our new market strategy, my assistant handed me a printed report from Industry Review Weekly. The bold headline across the front page read, "Orion in free fall, nearly 19% revenue loss in 1 quarter." The article quoted an anonymous internal source. Clients didn't walk away from the product. They walked away from the people who got replaced by software. Orion's headquarters launched into emergency meetings. The current CEO, a finance guy from New Jersey, was forced to hold a special shareholders session. I wasn't present, but someone sent me the audio recording and a file from an unknown email address. His voice trembled under pressure. Yes, there has been a shift in strategic client portfolios. We are rapidly deploying retention measures. One shareholder cut in sharply. Can you confirm that 7 of the 10 clients formerly managed by Luca Weston have left Orion in the past 3 months? The silence on that tape hit harder than any explanation. The next morning, Miran's name was gone from the leadership board. An internal memo followed with polished wording. Ms. Miran Thorne will transition into a new role within strategic long-term initiatives, focusing on operational data reform. People in the industry understood exactly what that meant. That evening, I got a text from Thomas, the same one who'd met me at a cafe the month before. It included just a link and a note. Miranda's quarterly presentation slides, page 18. I opened the file and scrolled to the marks section. On the screen was a chart of lost revenue by client, each name clearly listed, flagged in red with the note, personal connection lost, handoff failed. At the bottom of the slide, one line in italics read, Luca Weston, primary indirect cause of Tier A client loss. I chuckled. No media campaign, no lawsuits filed. I just walked away. At the right time, in the right way, carrying something they never knew how to quantify. That night, Daniel, the CEO of North Bay, walked into my office and dropped a folder on the desk. We've been nominated for the fastest growing interior supplier award in the state. I nodded, saying nothing, because that wasn't what I was aiming for. What I really wanted was for the ones who pushed me out of the executive table to learn a lesson they thought was obvious. No spreadsheet can replace trust. And they learned it the most expensive way possible. North Bay's third floor had once been nothing more than a storage space for technical archives. 6 months after I came on, it became the hub for our commercial interior division, an open space with 4 L-shaped desks, 1 whiteboard wall, and a mini fridge stocked with cold brew and energy drinks. The founding team included 4 people, none of whom had prior experience in traditional interiors. I picked a structural engineer from Kansas, a former steel sales director, a young man who failed at his first construction startup, and a 43-year-old woman who had quit after her previous company cut her salary unfairly. None of them could tell white pine from red oak at the start, but they shared one trait. They knew what it felt like to be underestimated, and were ready to prove people wrong when finally given a chance. I didn't hand out KPIs. I handed out client maps. Each person was assigned a group of former partners, not to win them back, but to listen and understand why they left. Every piece of feedback, every complaint email, I printed and pinned them to the wall as a daily reminder. Keeping a client isn't as hard as remembering what made them trust you in the first place. I personally inspected the first 3 shipments before they left the warehouse. The final signature was mine, not any system's. When the first delivery reached Carson's new site in Santa Clara, I was already there at 5:30 a.m. just to make sure the driver didn't pull up to the wrong gate. Carson looked at me standing by the pallet and grinned faintly. You never change, huh, Luca? I replied, I don't change, but how I prove it might. By the end of the first quarter, we'd secured contracts with 5 major construction firms, totaling over $7 million. None of it came from marketing. All of it started with a check-in call, a low-key meeting, and one simple question. What do you need from me to make sure your project doesn't fall behind again? 8 months in, our division's revenue surpassed $19 million. The executive team started paying attention. I didn't send in a growth plan. I sent one email to Daniel, the CEO, with a single line. We'll hit $26 million by year-end if I can hire 2 more people and a logistics assistant. 3 hours later, he replied, hire immediately. Budgets approved. We weren't fighting for market share. We created demand people thought was gone. An independent survey in a trade journal named North Bay the easiest partner to work with for technically complex builds. I didn't frame it or post it online. I printed it and pinned it in the meeting room, circling one client quote in red. They listen. They don't push for the close. In November, Daniel invited me to lunch at a small Italian restaurant 10 minutes from HQ. During the meal, he slid an envelope across the table. I opened it to find an invitation to the next quarter's board strategy session, along with a handwritten note. Not a formal seat yet, but you need to be in the room. I wasn't surprised. I only asked, "Can I speak freely?" Daniel nodded. "That's exactly why I want you there." Later that day, I walked the third floor, quietly watching my team erase old goals and prepare new ones. They didn't need pressure. They knew success didn't come from applause. It came from daily patience. Every shipment arriving on time, every email answered before the client had to follow up. I didn't retaliate against anyone. I simply kept doing what I'd always done, this time with a team that believed in me and numbers that spoke for themselves. What Miranda failed to see, and what skeptical shareholders once doubted, now lived clearly in our revenue sheets and in the eyes of clients who returned without a single push. That Friday afternoon, as I was reviewing quarterly numbers with the coordination team, my assistant walked in holding a small note and whispered, "There's a woman named Miranda Thorne waiting in the lobby. No appointment." I looked up, paused a few seconds, then replied, "Send her to room 2. I entered first, choosing the chair facing the window. Miranda appeared a few minutes later. Slimmer, with a handbag no longer branded by luxury. Her clothes were simple, and her voice much softer than it had been at Orion. "Thank you for making time," she said, still standing. "I have 20 minutes, I replied, tapping my watch, making my distance clear. Miranda sat down, fingers interlocked on the table. "I'm currently with a new strategic consulting firm. We're preparing a case study on trust dynamics in corporate relationships. I was hoping you could share your perspective on how you rebuilt your entire client network in under a year." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I opened a drawer, pulled out a printed internal report from 2 weeks ago, and slid it across to her. "I didn't rebuild," I said. "I just didn't let others destroy what still remained." She skimmed a few lines and then set it down. "I made a mistake." I leaned back slightly, hands on my lap, gaze steady. "You weren't wrong for wanting change. You were wrong for thinking you could do it without listening to those keeping the system alive." She nodded, eyes drifting. "I thought data could replace instinct, that performance could be coded. But I couldn't measure the reaction of people like Carson or Olivia when they realized no one understood their world anymore." "I didn't do this to beat you, Miranda," I said directly. "I did it because there are dozens of people out there counting on us for their projects, their reputation, their family's income. Failure here doesn't mean a bad quarter. It means lost contracts, lost staff, lost sleep." Miranda looked down, then back up. "If I sent over a draft of the study, would you allow me to quote you by name?" "No." She paused. "I don't need credit, and I'm not interested in contributing to a report from the same people who once called me an obstacle to financial restructuring." She was silent for a few more seconds. When she left the room, there was no handshake, just a slight nod, like a quiet apology that never reached the surface. That evening, I stopped by my daughter's place in Walnut Creek. My sister was carrying my grandson around the backyard, and Lauren, my eldest, was firing up the grill. "Did you just fire someone from the company?" she joked as I walked in with a bottle of wine. "Didn't fire, just didn't invite her back," I replied. We both laughed. Then Lauren pulled up a chair beside me, looking out at the patio lit with soft string lights. "Have you ever thought about retiring?" I looked up at the clear panels above us as the breeze rolled through. "When everything can stand without the last person holding the door open, I'll think about it." She nodded. "My firm needs someone to oversee the interior frame designs on the new model homes. You free?" "I'll come take a look," I answered. That night, once home, I sat at my desk and pulled out the familiar black notebook. On the last page, a single handwritten line. "Trust is the one thing you can't outsource." I didn't close the notebook. I left it open under the soft glow of my desk lamp. Tomorrow morning, my team would start processing an order for a public school project in San Mateo. It wasn't a big contract, but the client was signing their first interiors deal in 12 years because they believed not every company was just about numbers. I didn't need a system to log victories. The people who came back had already done that for me, not through words, but through action, every day, quietly, like the way an old timber beam holds up a roof through 10 rainy seasons. Luca Wesson didn't need revenge to prove his worth. While others chased metrics and systems, he chose to hold firm to his principles: listening, trust, and action. He left a company he'd given nearly 20 years to, without bitterness, and rebuilt everything from scratch using a name and reputation no amount of money could buy. 1 year later, Luca hadn't just reclaimed his career, he had become a symbol of something rare in modern business: professional integrity that no algorithm can replicate. What do you think about how Luca handled change and stayed true to his values? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life, family, and trust.